Wyoming Territory, 1886. Caleb Thornton stood alone at his wife's grave, the summer wind carrying dust across the wooden marker. 3 years. 3 years since fever took her. 3 years of silence in a house built for a family he'd never have. He pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket, read it one more time. "I ain't looking for love. Just honest work and a roof that don't leak. If that's enough, I'll come." It was enough. God help him, it had to be enough. If you want to know what happened when Ruth Brennan stepped off that stagecoach, subscribe to my channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Caleb Thornton's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He stood in front of the general store in Ridgewood, hat pulled low against the afternoon sun, watching the stagecoach kick up dust on the horizon. His foreman, Elijah Cross, leaned against the hitching post beside him, chewing on a piece of straw. "You gonna stand there twitching all day?" Elijah asked. "Or you gonna breathe sometime?" "I'm breathing." "Could have fooled me." Elijah shifted the straw to the other side of his mouth. "Coach will be here in 10 minutes. Might want to unclench them fists before she sees you looking like you're fixin' for a fight." Caleb looked down at his hands. Elijah was right. He forced his fingers to relax, wiped his palms on his trousers. "What if she ain't what her letters said?" Caleb muttered. "What if she takes one look at the ranch and gets right back on that coach?" "Then she gets back on the coach," Elijah shrugged. "Ain't the end of the world." "Easy for you to say. Molly's been your wife for 30 years. 32, and it weren't easy at the start, I can tell you that. Elijah pushed off the hitching post. "Marriage ain't never easy. But you can't build nothing alone, Caleb. Your uncle knew that. Why you think he left you that ranch?" Caleb didn't answer. Samuel Thornton had left him 3,000 acres of Wyoming Territory, a herd of cattle, and a house too big for one man. What his uncle hadn't left him was any notion of how to fill the silence that echoed through those rooms every night. "She might be different," Elijah said quietly. "This Ruth Brennan. Her letters seemed solid." "Solid," Caleb almost laughed. "That's what you say about a fence post. Fence posts keep things standing. Ain't nothing wrong with solid." The stagecoach rounded the last bend, and Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. 3 months of letters. 3 months of careful words written by candlelight, each one revealing a little more, promising a little less. Ruth Brennan hadn't made any grand declarations. She hadn't claimed to be beautiful or accomplished or eager for frontier adventure. "I can cook, clean, and keep books. I don't complain about hard work. I don't have family that'll come causing trouble." If you're looking for pretty words and fancy promises, I ain't your woman. But if you need someone who'll stay when things get hard, I'm that. That letter had been the one that decided him. The coach pulled up in a cloud of dust, and the driver jumped down, yanking open the door. "Ridgewood! 20 minutes rest, folks!" A heavy-set man in a bowler hat climbed out first, then a young mother clutching a squalling baby. Caleb held his breath. Then she appeared. Ruth Brennan stood maybe 5'5", with brown hair pulled back in a practical knot that was already coming loose from the journey. Her dress was blue cotton, faded from washing, mended at the sleeve. She wasn't beautiful, not in the way of the painted ladies in the saloons or the fine women in the mail-order catalogs. But when she stepped down from the coach and her eyes, brown, warm, wary, met his across the dusty street, Caleb felt something shift in his chest. She looked tired, bone-tired, the kind of tired that went deeper than a long journey. She looked like she'd been running a long time. He stepped forward before he could second-guess himself. "Miss Brennan?" "Mr. Thornton." She didn't smile, didn't offer her hand, just looked at him with those careful eyes, measuring. "You're taller than I pictured." You're... He stopped. What could he say? You look like you ain't slept in a week? You look like you're about to bolt if I make one wrong move? You made it. I did. She glanced around the small town, the general store, the saloon, the church at the end of the street. This is Ridgewood? This is it. Ranch is about 15 miles west. We should get going if we want to make it before dark. All right. She turned back to the coach, pulling the single carpet bag from the luggage rack. That was all. One bag. Everything she owned in one worn bag. Elijah caught Caleb's eye and nodded once. Solid. This is Elijah Cross, Caleb said as they approached the wagon. My foreman. Been running the ranch since before my uncle passed. Ruth looked at Elijah. Really looked. Taking in the gray in his close-cropped hair. The strength still evident in his broad shoulders. The intelligence in his dark eyes. A lot of folks from back east got strange around former slaves. Ruth just nodded. Mr. Cross. Ma'am, Elijah tipped his hat. Welcome to Wyoming. Thank you. She let Caleb help her up onto the wagon seat, her hand small and calloused in his. A working hand. Mr. Thornton's letters said you and your wife have a cabin on the property. We do. Molly's been cooking for the hands since we come here 12 years back. She's looking forward to meeting you. Elijah climbed into the wagon bed. Ain't often we get new folks. The ride to Thornton Creek Ranch was mostly silent. Ruth sat straight-backed beside Caleb, her carpetbag clutched on her lap, watching the landscape roll by. Caleb found himself stealing glances at her profile. The slight upturn of her nose, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way her fingers kept twisting the handle of her bag. You can ask, she said suddenly, not looking at him. Ask what? Whatever it is you're chewing on. You've been staring at me since we left town. Heat crept up Caleb's neck. I wasn't. You were. It's all right. I reckon you got a right to be curious. She finally turned to face him. What do you want to know? 100 questions crowded his mind. Why did you really leave St. Louis? What are you running from? Why did you answer my advertisement when you could have found work anywhere? What came out was, Are you hungry? Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. The ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. Starving, actually. The stage stop serves slop I wouldn't feed to pigs. Molly's got supper waiting. She's been cooking since dawn. Then I'm already in her debt. Ruth turned back to watch the road. Your letters said the ranch needs organizing. Books, supplies, household management. It does. I've been running it alone since my uncle died. I'm good with cattle, not so good with numbers. I'm good with numbers. She said it simply, a statement of fact. I kept books for a boarding house in Ohio, then for a family in St. Louis. I can have your account straight within a week. That fast? Numbers don't lie, Mr. Thornton. They're either right or they're wrong. People are the complicated ones. Caleb let that sit between them for a moment. You can call me Caleb. If this arrangement works out, seems strange to keep saying Mr. Thornton. Ruth was quiet so long, he thought she might not answer. Then, Ruth then, for me. Ruth. He tested the name. Solid. Biblical. The kind of name that stayed. That's a good name. My mama picked it. Said Ruth in the Bible went where she wasn't wanted and made herself necessary. A shadow crossed her face. Mama had a way of seeing the future, I suppose. Before Caleb could ask what she meant, the ranch came into view. Thornton Creek Ranch sprawled across a valley cupped between two ridges, the main house standing tall against the evening sky. Even from a distance, Ruth could see it was a real house. 2 stories, proper windows, a porch that wrapped around the front. The barn was big, the bunkhouse well-maintained, and cattle dotted the grassland stretching toward the mountains. "It's more than I expected," Ruth said quietly. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet." She looked at him with those measuring eyes. "Ask me in a month." They pulled up to the house as the sun touched the western ridge. A woman emerged from the smaller cabin nearby. Molly Cross, had to be. She was round and warm-looking, with silver threading through her dark hair, and a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Lord, look at you!" Molly came down the steps, wiping her hands on her apron. "You must be Ruth. Come here, child. Let me look at you." Ruth climbed down from the wagon, and Molly took her hands, studying her face with a kind of frank assessment that would have made most people uncomfortable. Ruth just stood there, letting herself be examined. "You're tired," Molly pronounced, "and too thin. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" "I couldn't say, ma'am." "None of that ma'am business. I'm Molly." She tucked Ruth's arm through hers and started toward the main house. "Supper's on the table, and there's hot water ready for washing. Caleb, bring her bag. And don't just stand there gaping. Come eat before it gets cold." Caleb caught Elijah's eye. The older man was grinning. "Told you," Elijah said. "Solid." Supper was the best food Ruth had eaten in months. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from Molly's garden, and biscuits so light they practically floated off the plate. Ruth tried to eat slowly, to remember her manners, but hunger won out. Molly watched her with satisfied approval. "That's right, eat up. You need feeding." "This is wonderful," Ruth managed between bites. "I haven't tasted cooking like this since—" She stopped abruptly. "Since?" Caleb prompted. "Since my mama." Ruth set down her fork. "She died when I was 10. My daddy passed a year later." "I'm sorry." Caleb's voice was gentle. "My mother passed when I was young too. And my father, well, he lasted a few more years, but he wasn't ever really the same." Ruth looked at him, really looked, for the first time since meeting him. There was grief in his eyes, old and worn smooth by time. She recognized it because she saw the same thing in her mirror every morning. "Loss don't ever really leave, does it?" she said quietly. "It just settles in, becomes part of the foundation." "That's about the truest thing anyone's ever said to me." Molly and Elijah exchanged a glance across the table. "Well," Molly said, breaking the moment, "Ruth, I've made up the room off the kitchen for you. It's small, but it's got a good bed and a window that catches the morning light. If this arrangement works out, and you two marry proper, you'll move into the main bedroom upstairs. But for now, this keeps things respectable." "That's thoughtful," Ruth hesitated. "Mrs. Cross, Molly, I want to be clear about something. I didn't come here looking for love. I came looking for honest work and a fair arrangement. Mr. Thornton's letters promised both." "Caleb," he corrected quietly. "Caleb." She said his name carefully, like she was testing its weight. "I've been on my own since I was 16. I've worked for my keep everywhere I've been. I expect this to be the same. A partnership, nothing more." Molly's eyes softened. "Child, nobody's asking for more than you're willing to give. Caleb here ain't the type to push where he ain't wanted. Lord knows, he's been alone too long himself." "What happened to your wife?" Ruth asked before she could stop herself. Then she shook her head. "Forgive me, that's not my business." "No." Caleb's voice was rough. "It's fair. We're supposed to be considering each other. You should know." He pushed his plate away. "Her name was Sarah. We were married 2 years when fever took her. That was 3 years ago. No children?" "No." The word came out sharp, then softer. She was carrying when she died. The fever took them both. Ruth felt something twist in her chest. a grief that wasn't hers to carry but settled there anyway. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have asked." "You had a right to know. I got a past. You got a past. We both got ghosts." Caleb met her eyes across the table. "The question is whether we can build something despite them." The room went quiet. Even Molly stopped bustling. Ruth held Caleb's gaze for a long moment. She thought about the things she hadn't told him. The accusations, the shame, the way she'd fled St. Louis like a thief in the night, even though she'd never stolen anything in her life. She thought about Mr. Patterson's hands on her arm, his voice in her ear, the way his wife had looked at her when the lies started spreading. She wasn't ready to tell him. Might never be ready. But looking at this man with his wounded eyes and his honest face, she thought maybe, just maybe, she'd found a place where the past might finally stop chasing her. "I reckon we can try," she said. Caleb's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "That's all I'm asking." Ruth woke before dawn, a habit she couldn't shake no matter how tired she was. The room off the kitchen was small but clean, and true to Molly's word, the morning light came through the window, soft and golden. She dressed quickly in her work dress, brown cotton, sturdy, forgettable, and braided her hair back tight. No sense in vanity. There was work to do. The kitchen was empty, but the stove was still warm. Ruth found coffee in the pot and poured herself a cup, wrapping her hands around it as she looked out the window at the ranch coming to life. Cowpokes were already moving toward the barn. She could see Elijah's tall figure giving orders, pointing men toward different tasks. In the corral, a young Mexican man, Diego she'd learn later, was working with a skittish mare, his voice low and soothing. "You're up early." Ruth turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking like he'd been awake for hours. "Couldn't sleep past 4 if I tried," she said. "Old habit." "Same." He moved to the stove, poured himself coffee. "Thought I'd show you around today. The house, the books, the operation. So you know what you're working with." "I'd like that." They drank their coffee in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Ruth realized she couldn't remember the last time silence had felt this easy. "Molly usually comes around 6 to start breakfast for the hands," Caleb said. "But if you want to take over cooking—" "No." Ruth shook her head. "At least, not right away. Let me find my footing first. I can help her, learn how she runs things. Then we'll see." Caleb nodded, approval flickering in his eyes. "Smart. She's been doing it for years. Got her own system. Then I'll learn her system before I start changing anything. Most people would have come in wanting to take over." "Most people are fools." Ruth set down her cup. "Show me the books first. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Caleb's office was a disaster. Ruth stood in the doorway, staring at the chaos of papers, ledgers, receipts, and notes piled on every surface. Bills were stuffed into coffee cups. Correspondence was stacked in wobbly towers. A ledger lay open on the desk, the last entry dated 3 months prior. "I told you I wasn't good with numbers," Caleb said behind her, his tone somewhere between defensive and embarrassed. "This isn't about numbers." Ruth picked up a receipt that was threatening to slide onto the floor. "This is about— I don't even have words for what this is. My uncle kept everything in order. When he died, I just let it go. For 2 years? There were other priorities, the cattle, the men. The ranch was barely surviving when I took over. Marcus Webb, he was Uncle Samuel's partner. He cheated me out of 200 head before I caught on. I've been building back from nothing." Ruth filed that information away. A man who'd been cheated. A man who'd been alone. A man who'd let his house fall apart because he didn't have the energy to care about anything beyond survival. She understood that better than she wanted to admit. "All right," she rolled up her sleeves. "I'll need a full day to sort through this, maybe two. Don't expect miracles. Wouldn't dream of it." A hint of a smile touched Caleb's face. "I'll be in the south pasture most of the day, branding. Molly can get you anything you need." He left, and Ruth stared at the mountain of paper. Then she got to work. By noon, Ruth had sorted the chaos into categories: bills paid, bills unpaid, correspondence, receipts, and unclear. The last pile was the biggest. She'd found scraps of paper with numbers that didn't connect to anything, notes in handwriting that wasn't Caleb's, his uncle's probably, and several envelopes that had never been opened. One of those envelopes caught her eye. Heavy paper, formal hand, a return address in Chicago. She hesitated. It wasn't her place to open Caleb's mail. But it had been sitting here for months, clearly forgotten. And the word urgent was stamped across the front. Ruth made a decision. She slipped a knife under the seal. The letter inside was from a lawyer, a firm called Morrison & Associates. Ruth read it once, then again, her heart starting to pound. "Dear Mr. Thornton, this letter serves as formal notice that Mr. Victor Shaw has filed a claim against Thornton Creek Ranch, citing breach of contract related to water rights agreements made with your late uncle, Samuel Thornton. Mr. Shaw alleges that the original agreement entitled him to access of Thornton Creek for irrigation purposes, and that you have unlawfully restricted said access." Ruth kept reading. The language was dense, legal, designed to intimidate. But the meaning was clear. Someone was trying to take Caleb's ranch. She was still holding the letter when Molly appeared in the doorway. "Ruth, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Molly," Ruth held up the letter. "How much do you know about a man named Victor Shaw?" Molly's expression went dark. "I know enough to spit when I hear his name. Why? What's that?" "Trouble." Ruth set the letter down carefully. "I think Caleb needs to come back from the south pasture." Caleb read the letter 3 times before he spoke. "When did this come?" "The envelope's dated 5 months ago." Ruth watched his face, saw the anger building behind his eyes. "It was in the pile, unopened." 5 months. Caleb's hand crumpled the edge of the paper. "That snake's been filing claims against me for 5 months, and I didn't even know." "Who is Victor Shaw?" Ruth asked. "Owns the biggest spread in the territory, the Double S, south of here. He's been trying to buy me out since before my uncle died." Caleb threw the letter onto the desk. "The water rights claim is garbage. Uncle Samuel never made any agreement about the creek." "Can you prove that?" Caleb stopped, looked at the chaos of papers Ruth had been sorting. "The original deed should be here somewhere, and any agreements my uncle made." "Then we find them." Ruth pulled a chair up to the desk. "You know this ranch. I know paperwork. Between us, we can figure this out." Caleb looked at her. This woman he'd known for less than a day, who was already rolling up her sleeves to fight a battle that wasn't hers. "Why?" he asked. "This ain't your problem. We got a 3-month arrangement. You could walk away." Ruth met his eyes steadily. "I could, but I'm tired of walking away from things." Something passed between them. An understanding. A beginning. "All right," Caleb said. "Then let's find those papers." They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, sorting through years of Samuel Thornton's documents. Elijah joined them, adding his memory of conversations and agreements. Molly kept them fed and caffeinated. Around midnight, Ruth found it. "Here." She pulled a yellow document from a folder marked Water. "This is the original deed. And look." She pointed to a clause near the bottom. "All water rights pertaining to Thornton Creek remain in perpetuity with the owner of the land through which said creek runs. That's you, Caleb. Caleb leaned over her shoulder to read. That means Shaw's got no claim? It means his claim is based on a lie. Ruth set the document aside carefully. We need a lawyer to file a response. Someone in Ridgewood? Judge Patterson handles most legal matters, Caleb frowned. But he's friendly with Shaw. Has been for years. Then we find someone else. Someone in Cheyenne, maybe. Ruth started making notes. We'll need copies of everything. The original deed, any correspondence with Shaw, records of him trying to buy you out. You're talking like you're staying. Ruth's pen stopped moving. She looked up to find Caleb watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I told you, she said carefully. I'm tired of running. This is more than you signed up for. Legal battles. A man like Shaw, he don't fight fair. He'll make trouble. For the ranch. For me. Caleb's voice dropped. For you. Then I guess I'll have to make trouble right back. A slow smile spread across Caleb's face. The first real smile she'd seen from him. You know something, Ruth Brennan? I think you might be exactly what this ranch needed. Don't get sentimental. But she was almost smiling too. We still got work to do. They worked until dawn broke golden over the mountains, side by side, building something neither of them had words for yet. And 300 miles away, Victor Shaw was already planning his next move. 3 weeks changed everything. Ruth learned the rhythm of Thornton Creek Ranch, the way she'd learned everything in her life, by watching, listening, and working harder than anyone expected. She rose before dawn. She kept the books balanced to the penny. She helped Molly in the kitchen without trying to take over. She earned her place, one task at a time. And somewhere along the way, she stopped counting the days until she could leave. You're staring again, she said without looking up from the ledger. Caleb leaned against the office doorway, arms crossed. Just wondering how you made sense of that mess so fast. Numbers don't argue. They just tell the truth. Ruth set down her pen. Speaking of truth, we got a response from the lawyer in Cheyenne. Mr. Harrison says Shaw's claim won't hold up in court. But he also says Shaw knows that. Then why file it? To make you spend money fighting it. To wear you down. To make selling look easier than fighting. Ruth met his eyes. He's patient, Caleb. Men like him always are. Caleb pushed off the doorframe. Men like him? Rich men. Powerful men. Men who think they can take whatever they want because no one's ever told them no. Something dark flickered across her face. Caleb noticed, but didn't push. He was learning that Ruth revealed herself in pieces, small truths scattered like breadcrumbs. Push too hard, and she'd go silent for days. The lawyer wants a retainer, Ruth continued, her voice steady again. $50. I can pull it from the operating fund without hurting the ranch. Do it. Already done. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I figured you'd say that. You figured right. Caleb moved closer, looking over her shoulder at the neat columns of numbers. What else did you figure? That you haven't eaten since breakfast. That you've been in the south pasture since dawn. That Molly's got supper ready, and she's about 3 minutes from coming in here and dragging us both to the table by our ears. As if on cue, Molly's voice rang from the kitchen. Caleb Thornton! Ruth! If you two don't get in here right now, I'm feeding your portions to the dogs. Caleb laughed. A real laugh. Full and warm. Ruth felt something flutter in her chest that she immediately pushed down. Guess we better go, he said. Guess we better. They walked to the kitchen together, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Supper was beef stew with fresh bread, and the conversation flowed easier than it had those first awkward days. Elijah told stories about the early years with Samuel Thornton. Molly fussed over everyone's plates. Diego, who'd started joining them for evening meals, practiced his English with Ruth's patient correction. "You say, 'I am going,'" Ruth explained. "Not, 'I go.'" "I am going to the barn," Diego repeated carefully. "I am going to feed the horses." "Perfect." "Senora Ruth is a good teacher," Diego said to Caleb. "Better than the schoolmarm in town." "She's better than most at everything," Caleb said quietly. Ruth's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She looked at him, found him looking back with an expression that made her breath catch. "Well," Molly said, breaking the moment with a knowing smile, "I'd say we're all getting on pretty well around here." The kitchen door banged open. One of the younger hands, Billy, barely 18, stood there, chest heaving, face white as chalk. "Boss, you need to come, now!" Caleb was on his feet before Billy finished speaking. "What happened?" "The north fence. Someone cut it. The whole herd's scattered." Ruth watched Caleb's face go hard, watched his hands curl into fists, watched the rancher replace the man who'd been laughing just moments before. "How many head?" "Don't know yet. Could be 100. Could be more." "Elijah, get the men. We ride in 10 minutes. Caleb grabbed his hat from the hook. "Ruth, I'll be here when you get back." She stood, already clearing plates. "Go." He paused at the door, looking at her with something she couldn't name. "Lock the doors tonight." "Caleb, please." It wasn't a request. It was fear. Fear for her. "I'll lock them," she said. He nodded once and was gone. Ruth stood in the empty kitchen, listening to the thunder of hooves fade into the night. Her hands were steady as she finished clearing the table. Her heart was not. "He's worried about you," Molly said softly. "First time I've seen him worried about anyone in years." "He shouldn't be. I can take care of myself." "I know you can, child." Molly touched her arm gently. "But sometimes it's nice to have someone worry anyway." Ruth didn't answer. She wasn't sure she knew how. They found the cattle scattered across 3 miles of grassland. It took until dawn to round them up, and when the count came in, Caleb felt his stomach drop. 23 head missing," Elijah reported. "Could have wandered further. Could have been rustled. Could have been Shaw. Can't prove it. Don't need to prove it. I know." Caleb stared at the cut fence, the clean edges that no animal could have made. He's sending a message. What are you going to do? Caleb thought about Ruth's words. Patient. Men like him always are. Nothing. Yet. He rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed higher, exhaustion pulling at his bones. He expected to find the house quiet, everyone sleeping off the long night. Instead, he found Ruth on the porch, coffee in hand, watching him approach. "You didn't sleep," he said, dismounting. "Neither did you." "I was working." "So was I." She held out the cup. "Molly's coffee, strong enough to wake the dead." He took it, their fingers brushing. She didn't pull away. "How bad?" she asked. 23 head, maybe more." "Shaw?" "Can't prove it." "But you know." "Yeah." Caleb drained the coffee in one long swallow. "I know." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've been thinking about how to fight back without fighting." "What do you mean?" "Shaw wants you isolated, alone, easier to break." She stepped closer, lowering her voice even though no one else was around. "So we do the opposite. We build alliances. The other ranchers, the townspeople. We make it so attacking you means attacking the whole community." Caleb stared at her. "You've been thinking about this all night?" "I've had practice. Surviving men like Shaw, I mean." That shadow crossed her face again. You don't beat them by being stronger. You beat them by being smarter, by having more friends than they do. And how do we make friends? Molly mentioned a church social next Sunday. Everyone in the territory comes. Ruth's chin lifted. We should go, together. The implication hung between them. Together. As a couple. As something more than a business arrangement. People will talk, Caleb said carefully. Let them talk. Talking isn't the problem. Silence is. Ruth met his eyes. Unless you'd rather I didn't. I want you there. The words came out rougher than he intended. I want you everywhere, Ruth. That's becoming a problem. She went very still. What kind of problem? The kind where I'm supposed to be keeping my distance, and instead I'm counting the hours until I see you again. Ruth's breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty. Not this much. Not this fast. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I know our arrangement. 3 months, then you decide. I'm not trying to pressure you. He set down the empty cup. You should know. That's all. He walked past her into the house, leaving Ruth standing on the porch with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed walls starting to crack. The church social was everything Ruth had dreaded, and everything she needed. People stared. Of course they did. The mysterious woman from back east, living on Caleb Thornton's ranch, appearing on his arm like she belonged there. Whispers followed them through the crowd. That's her? The mail-order bride? Don't look like much, does she? I heard she can't even cook. Molly Cross does everything. Ruth kept her spine straight and her smile fixed. She'd survived worse than small-town gossip. Much worse. Mrs. Patterson? Caleb stopped before a stern-faced woman in her 60s. May I introduce Miss Ruth Brennan? The woman's eyes swept over Ruth with cold assessment. Miss Brennan, we've heard interesting things about you. I'm sure you have, ma'am. Ruth kept her voice pleasant. Small towns do love their stories. Indeed. Mrs. Patterson's lips thinned. I do hope you're not planning to stay. Women from the East rarely do. With respect, ma'am, I'm from Ohio. Not quite the East. Ruth felt Caleb tense beside her. And I found Wyoming suits me just fine. Mrs. Patterson looked at Caleb. Your uncle would have had concerns about this arrangement. My uncle would have appreciated a woman who works as hard as Ruth does. Caleb's voice was even, but Ruth heard the steel beneath it. Now, if you'll excuse us, ma'am, we have other folks to greet. He guided Ruth away with a hand on the small of her back. His touch burned through her dress. Thank you, she murmured. For what? For not letting me punch her. Caleb's laugh startled them both. Several heads turned at the sound. Ruth Brennan, you might be the best thing that ever happened to this ranch. Don't get ahead of yourself. But she was smiling. Really smiling. They worked the crowd together, and Ruth proved herself invaluable. She remembered names. She asked about children and crops and weather. She complimented the ladies on their cooking and listened to the men complain about cattle prices. By the end of the afternoon, half the town had warmed to her, and the other half was at least curious. Then Victor Shaw arrived. Ruth knew him immediately, even though they'd never met. He carried himself like a man who'd never been refused anything. Tall, silver-haired, expensive clothes that looked wrong in this plain church hall. His eyes swept the room and landed on Caleb with predatory interest. Thornton, Shaw's voice carried. Surprised to see you here. Heard you had some trouble with your fences. News travels fast. Bad news always does. Shaw's gaze shifted to Ruth. And who is this lovely creature? Ruth felt her skin crawl. She'd seen that look before. On another man, in another place. A man whose hands had grabbed her arm, whose voice had promised things she never wanted. "This is Miss Ruth Brennan." Caleb moved slightly, positioning himself between Ruth and Shaw. "She's managing my household accounts." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Shaw's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A pleasure, Miss Brennan. I'm Victor Shaw. I own the Double S Ranch." "I know who you are." Ruth kept her voice steady. "Your reputation precedes you." "Does it? I hope it's a good one." "It's an interesting one." Shaw's eyes narrowed slightly. Most women simpered around him. This one had teeth. "Well, Miss Brennan, I hope you'll enjoy your time in Wyoming, however long that may be." He turned back to Caleb. "Think about my offer, Thornton. Ranching's a hard life. Some men aren't cut out for it. And some men should mind their own business. Everything in this territory is my business." Shaw smiled again. "Remember that." He walked away, and Ruth felt Caleb's tension like a physical thing. "That's him," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's him. He's worse than I thought. He's exactly what I thought." Caleb's jaw was tight. "Let's go home." Home. He'd said it without thinking, and Ruth realized, with a jolt that went through her whole body, that she'd started thinking of it that way too. 2 days later, the real trouble started. Ruth was in the office, reviewing the month's expenses, when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked up to see a young man climbing down, sandy hair, thin face, clothes that had seen better days. Something about him made her blood run cold. "Can I help you?" she called from the porch, keeping her distance. "I'm looking for Ruth Brennan." The man's voice was familiar. Too familiar. "My sister." The world tilted. "Thomas?" He turned, and Ruth saw her baby brother's face. Older now, harder, but still the same boy she'd left behind in Ohio 6 years ago. "Ruth," his voice cracked. "I finally found you." She came down the steps slowly, afraid he might disappear if she moved too fast. "How? How did you find me?" "Your letters to the general delivery in Cheyenne. I've been tracking you for months." Thomas stopped a few feet away, uncertainty in his eyes. "You're not an easy woman to find. That was the point." "I know." He swallowed hard. "Ruth, I need to tell you something. About St. Louis. About Mr. Patterson." Ruth's stomach dropped. "Thomas, don't. He's dead." Thomas said it fast, like ripping off a bandage. "Heart attack, 6 months ago. And before he died, Ruth, he confessed. He told his wife everything. What he tried to do to you, how he spread those lies when you refused him." Ruth couldn't breathe. The ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. "Mrs. Patterson's been trying to find you," Thomas continued. "She wants to apologize. She wants to clear your name. Ruth, everyone in St. Louis knows the truth now. You could come home." Home. The word meant nothing anymore. "Ruth?" Caleb's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. "Who's this?" "My brother." The words felt strange in her mouth. "Thomas, this is Caleb Thornton. He owns this ranch." Thomas looked at Caleb, then at Ruth, understanding dawning on his face. "You're the one she's been writing to. The rancher looking for a wife." "That's me." Caleb moved to stand beside Ruth. "You look like you've had a long journey." "I have." Thomas's eyes stayed on his sister. "Ruth, did you hear what I said? You can come home. You don't have to hide anymore." Ruth felt Caleb go very still beside her. Felt the question he wasn't asking. Would she leave, now that she could? "I heard you," she said quietly. "And I'm glad you came. But Thomas—" She looked at Caleb, at the ranch stretching behind him, at the life she'd started to build without meaning to. "I am home." Thomas stared at her. You've been here less than a month. I know. You ran halfway across the country to escape something that doesn't even exist anymore. You could go back to St. Louis. You could have your old life back. I don't want my old life. Ruth's voice was steady now, certain. I want this one. Caleb's hand found hers, his fingers intertwined with hers, solid and warm. Then you better come inside, he said to Thomas. We got a lot to talk about. Supper that night was quiet. Thomas ate like he hadn't seen food in days, which he probably hadn't. Ruth watched him, seeing the boy she remembered overlaid with the man he'd become. Tell me about the others, she said finally. Mary, James, little Sarah. Mary's married, got 2 kids now. James is working at the mill in Cleveland. Thomas set down his fork. Sarah died 3 years back. Scarlet fever. The grief hit Ruth like a physical blow. Little Sarah, who she'd raised from a baby after their mama died. Little Sarah, who she'd left behind. I didn't know, she whispered. How could you? You disappeared. Thomas's voice held no accusation, just weariness. We didn't know if you were alive or dead, Ruth. I spent 2 years thinking the worst. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. I thought it was safer, for everyone, if I just vanished. Safer from what? Patterson's lies? From Patterson himself. Ruth's hands clenched in her lap. You don't know what he threatened, Thomas. What he said he'd do if I didn't give him what he wanted. The table went silent. Caleb's jaw tightened. Molly pressed a hand to her mouth. He said he'd ruin us, Ruth continued, her voice shaking now. All of us. Said he had connections. Said he could make sure none of us ever worked again in St. Louis. Said worse things, too. Things I won't repeat. Ruth. Thomas reached for her hand. So I ran. I thought if I was gone, he'd leave you alone. I thought I was protecting you. Tears she'd held back for years finally spilled over. I didn't know he'd die. I didn't know the truth would come out. I just knew I couldn't stay, and I couldn't fight, and I couldn't... She couldn't finish. Caleb's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest. She buried her face in his shirt and let herself break. Just for a moment. It's all right, he murmured against her hair. You're safe now. You hear me? You're safe. Thomas watched them, something shifting in his expression. Understanding, maybe. Or acceptance. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know. I was angry for so long, thinking you'd abandoned us. But I didn't know. Ruth pulled back, wiping her eyes. You had a right to be angry. Maybe. But I don't want to be angry anymore. Thomas stood, moved around the table, and wrapped his arms around his sister for the first time in 6 years. I'm just glad you're alive. I'm glad you're happy. I am, Ruth whispered. I really am. Over Thomas's shoulder, she met Caleb's eyes. The look in them stole her breath. He loved her. She could see it plain as day. And God help her, she was starting to love him back. Thomas stayed a week. He helped with the ranch work, proving himself useful despite his city-soft hands. He ate Molly's cooking like every meal was a miracle. He told Ruth stories about the siblings she'd left behind, filling in the gaps of the years she'd missed. And he watched Caleb and Ruth together with growing approval. He's a good man, Thomas said on his last night, sitting on the porch with Ruth while the stars came out. Better than I expected. He is. You love him. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. I think I do. I didn't mean to. It wasn't part of the plan. Plans change, Thomas bumped her shoulder. The best things usually aren't planned anyway. When did you get so wise? When my sister left and I had to figure things out for myself. But he was smiling. Ruth, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Lord knows you never listened anyway. But if you've found something good here, don't let fear take it from you. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. You've been afraid so long, you don't remember what it feels like to not be. Thomas stood, looking down at her with their mother's eyes. But I think Caleb Thornton might be worth the risk. He went inside, leaving Ruth alone with the night and her thoughts. She sat there for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead. She heard the door open behind her, knew without looking that it was Caleb. Thomas settled in? Yeah. Caleb sat down beside her, close enough that their arms touched. He's a good kid. He's not a kid anymore. That's my fault. It's Patterson's fault, not yours. Caleb's voice was firm. Ruth, look at me. She turned, and his face was inches from hers. I know we said 3 months, he said quietly. I know we agreed to keep this practical. But I can't pretend anymore. I love you. I've loved you since you stepped off that stagecoach with your one bag and your stubborn chin and your eyes that saw right through me. Caleb, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to decide anything tonight. But I needed you to know. Whatever happens with Shaw, whatever comes next, I want to face it with you. Not because of the arrangement, because of you. Ruth's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct she developed over years of survival screamed at her to pull back, to protect herself, to run. But she was tired of running. I love you too, she whispered. Caleb's breath caught. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. I love you, Caleb Thornton. And I'm terrified, and I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle as a prayer. Then let's try together. He kissed her under the stars, and Ruth felt something inside her that had been clenched tight for years finally begin to release. She was home. She was loved. She was staying. And tomorrow, they would face whatever came next. Together. Thomas left on a Tuesday morning, promising to write, promising to visit again. Ruth watched the wagon disappear down the road and felt something she hadn't expected. Not grief at his leaving, but gratitude that he'd come at all. You all right? Caleb asked, standing beside her. Better than all right. She turned to face him. I spent 6 years thinking I'd lost my family. Turns out I was wrong. You got family here too now. His voice was quiet. If you want it. Ruth took his hand. I want it. 3 days later, Victor Shaw made his next move. Ruth was in town picking up supplies when she heard the whispers. Women clustered near the general store, their voices dropping as she approached. Miss Brennan, Mrs. Patterson, the same cold woman from the church social, stepped into her path. I'm surprised you have the nerve to show your face. Ruth's stomach clenched. I beg your pardon? Don't play innocent with me. Mrs. Patterson's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. We know all about you now, about St. Louis, about why you really left. The blood drained from Ruth's face. What are you talking about? Mr. Shaw was kind enough to share some information about your history with your former employer. Mrs. Patterson's smile was cruel. Seems you have a habit of seducing the men you work for. That's a lie. Is it? Mr. Shaw has letters, documents, a very detailed account of your behavior in St. Louis. Ruth felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Shaw had dug into her past. Shaw had found Patterson's lies and was using them as weapons. Whatever Victor Shaw told you is false. Ruth kept her voice steady through sheer will. The man who made those accusations confessed on his deathbed that he lied. My brother came all the way from Ohio to tell me. How convenient. Mrs. Patterson's tone dripped with disbelief. A deathbed confession that no one can verify. It's the truth. The truth is that you've managed to sink your claws into one of the most eligible ranchers in the territory. The truth is that decent women don't travel alone across the country to live with men they've never met. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer. The truth is that Caleb Thornton deserves better than a woman with your reputation. Ruth felt the eyes of the whole town on her, felt the judgment, the condemnation, the sick pleasure they took in her humiliation. She could run. She could make excuses. She could do what she'd always done and disappear. Instead, she straightened her spine. You don't know anything about me, Mrs. Patterson. You don't know what I've survived or what I'm capable of. And you certainly don't know what Caleb Thornton deserves. Ruth's voice carried across the street. But I'll tell you what he doesn't deserve. A community that would believe a snake like Victor Shaw over a woman they've never bothered to actually know. She turned and walked to her wagon with her head held high, even as her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the reins. She didn't cry until she was halfway home. Caleb was in the barn when Ruth pulled up, but one look at her face brought him running. What happened? Ruth told him. Every word, every accusation, every cruel smile from Mrs. Patterson and her cronies. When she finished, Caleb's face was thunderous. Shaw did this. Of course he did. He's trying to isolate us. Turn the community against me so you'll send me away. Ruth laughed bitterly. It's a smart strategy. Attack the weakest point. You ain't weak. I'm a woman with a past, Caleb. In places like this, that's the same thing. No. Caleb took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. I don't care what Shaw says. I don't care what Mrs. Patterson thinks. I know who you are, Ruth. I've seen who you are every single day for the past month. But the town can go to hell. His voice was fierce. I didn't bring you here for them. I brought you here for me, for us. And if they can't see what I see, that's their loss. Tears spilled down Ruth's cheeks. I'm so tired, Caleb. I'm so tired of fighting, of defending myself against lies that just keep following me. Then let me fight for you. You can't fight rumors. Watch me. He kissed her forehead, gentle despite the anger still crackling in his eyes. We're going to town tomorrow, together, and I'm going to make damn sure everyone knows exactly where I stand. Ruth wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from the fallout, but the look in his eyes stopped her. For the first time in her life, someone was willing to fight for her. And God help her, she was going to let him. The next morning, Caleb rode into Ridgewood like a man going to war. He stopped first at the general store, where Mr. Henderson was sweeping the porch. Morning, Thornton.
What brings you to... I need to speak with you, Caleb's voice carried. All of you.
Heads turned. People emerged from shops. Within minutes, half the town had gathered on the main street. Caleb stood in the middle of them all, Ruth at his side. I hear there's been some talk, his voice was steady, about Miss Brennan, about her past. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Most of you know Victor Shaw's been trying to buy my ranch for years. You probably also know he's filed false claims, cut my fences, and scattered my cattle. Caleb's jaw tightened. Now he's spreading lies about the woman I intend to marry. Gasps. Whispers. Mrs. Patterson's face went sour. The accusations against Ruth Brennan are lies. Lies told by a man who tried to force himself on her and then destroyed her reputation when she refused. Caleb's voice rose. That man confessed before he died. His widow wants to apologize. The truth is documented and sworn. How do we know you're not just, someone started. Because I'm telling you, Caleb cut them off. I've never lied to any of you, never cheated you, never given you reason to doubt my word. And I'm telling you now, Ruth Brennan is the most honorable woman I've ever met. If you believe Victor Shaw over me, then you don't know me at all. Silence. Heavy. Waiting. Elijah stepped forward from where he'd been standing with Molly. I've known Caleb Thornton since he was a boy, visiting his uncle's ranch. I've known Ruth Brennan for a month. And I can tell you, both of them are people of character. Shaw ain't. Never has been. Shaw cheated my husband out of 50 head of cattle last spring, a woman's voice called out. Mrs. Thompson, the rancher's wife who'd traded bulls with Caleb. Made it look legal, but everyone knew. He tried to buy my place for half its worth when my husband died, another woman added. Said I'd never manage alone. Said I'd be grateful for any offer. More voices joined, more stories, more people who'd been on the wrong end of Victor Shaw's ambition. Ruth felt Caleb's hand tighten on hers. Shaw wants to divide us, Caleb said. Wants us fighting each other so he can pick us off one by one. I say we don't let him. A long moment passed. Then Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. You've always been square with us, Thornton. Your word's good enough for me. One by one, others nodded. Not everyone. Mrs. Patterson stood rigid with disapproval. A few others looked unconvinced. But enough. Enough to matter. Caleb turned to Ruth. Ready to go home? Yes. Her voice was thick with emotion. I'm ready. They drove back to the ranch in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence of fear or uncertainty. It was the quiet of two people who'd just faced a battle together and won. You didn't have to do that, Ruth finally said. Yes, I did. It could have backfired. They could have turned on you too. Then they would have turned. Caleb looked at her. Ruth, there ain't nothing in this world worth having if you're not willing to fight for it. My uncle taught me that. The war taught me that. And you, he stopped the wagon. You taught me that some things are worth risking everything for. Caleb. Marry me. Ruth's breath caught. What? I know we said 3 months. I know it's only been 6 weeks. But I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to pretend this is just an arrangement or a trial period. He took her hands. I love you, Ruth Brennan. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build something together, something real, something that lasts. Tears blurred her vision. I'm still scared. So am I. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of anything else. Ruth looked at this man, this stubborn, honorable, wounded man, who'd stood in front of his whole community and declared his faith in her. This man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. Yes, she whispered. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to build something with you. Yes, I love you. She was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes to all of it. Caleb kissed her, right there in the middle of the road, and Ruth felt something she'd stopped believing in years ago. Hope. They were married the following Sunday. It was a small ceremony. Elijah stood as Caleb's witness. Molly stood as Ruth's. Diego and the other ranch hands cleaned up and watched from the back of the small church. Reverend Miller kept the service short and sweet. Do you, Caleb Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Ruth Brennan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Ruth looked at Caleb, at the love shining in his gray eyes, at the future stretching out before them. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, You may kiss your bride." He kissed her soft and sweet, a promise sealed. The small group cheered. Molly cried. Even Elijah's eyes looked suspiciously bright. As they walked out of the church, Ruth felt lighter than she had in years. The past was behind her. The lies couldn't touch her anymore. She had a husband who loved her, a home that was truly hers, and a future worth believing in. Then she saw Victor Shaw standing across the street. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood there with his arms crossed and a smile that made Ruth's blood run cold. Caleb's arm tightened around her. "Ignore him. He's watching us. Let him watch. He can't hurt us." But Shaw's smile said otherwise. Shaw's smile said, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. 2 weeks after the wedding, the first shots were fired. Ruth was hanging laundry behind the house when she heard it. A crack, sharp and unmistakable, followed by the thud of something hitting wood. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran. "Caleb!" He emerged from the barn at a dead sprint. "Get inside, now!"
What's happening? Someone's shooting. Get inside.
Another crack, another thud. This time Ruth saw the puff of dust where the bullet hit the fence post. Caleb shoved her toward the house. "Move!" They made it to the porch as Elijah came running from the bunkhouse, rifle in hand. Diego and 2 other hands followed, weapons drawn. "Shots came from the ridge," Elijah said. 2, maybe 3 shooters. "Shaw." Caleb's voice was cold. "Can't prove it." "Don't need to prove it." Caleb grabbed his rifle from beside the door. "Ruth, stay inside. Don't come out for any reason." "Caleb, don't." "I mean it." He gripped her shoulders. "Promise me." The fear in his eyes stopped her argument. "I promise." He kissed her hard and fast, then ran toward the ridge with his men. Ruth waited. Minutes stretched into hours. She paced the kitchen, checked every window, jumped at every sound. Molly arrived, breathless from running. "I heard the shots. Where are they?" "The ridge."
They went after the shooters.
"Lord, have mercy." Molly took Ruth's hand. "Come, sit down. You'll wear a hole in the floor." "I can't sit. I can't." Ruth's voice broke. "What if something happens to him? What if—" "Don't." Molly's grip tightened. "Don't borrow trouble. Caleb knows what he's doing. Elijah knows what he's doing. They'll come back." "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." Molly pulled Ruth into a hug. "That's what faith is, child. Believing when you can't know for certain." They waited together, holding hands, watching the ridge. An hour later, horses appeared on the horizon. Ruth was out the door before Molly could stop her. She ran across the yard, heart pounding, counting figures. 1, 2, 3, 4. Caleb, riding in front, alive. She reached him as he dismounted, throwing herself into his arms. "You're okay. You're okay." "I'm okay." He held her tight. Shooters were gone by the time we got there. Found shell casings, boot prints, definitely 3 of them. Shaw's men? Couldn't identify them. Caleb's jaw tightened. But we found something else. Elijah rode up, holding a piece of paper. This was nailed to a tree. They wanted us to find it. Ruth took the paper with trembling hands. The message was short and brutal. "Leave or burn." The blood drained from Ruth's face. "He's going to burn us out." "He's going to try." Caleb took the note, crumpled it in his fist. "He won't succeed." "Caleb, maybe we should—" "No." His voice was hard. "I'm not running. I've spent my whole life building this place. I'm not giving it up because some rich man thinks he can take whatever he wants. It's not worth dying for. It's worth fighting for. Caleb cupped her face. You're worth fighting for. Everything we're building here is worth fighting for. I won't let fear make that decision. Ruth saw the steel in his eyes.
Saw the boy who'd survived the war, the man who'd built a ranch from nothing, the husband who'd promised to protect her. She could argue, she could beg him to run, or she could stand beside him. Then we fight, she said. Together. Caleb's smile was fierce. Together. They spent the next week preparing. Caleb organized the hands into rotating watches. Elijah mapped escape routes in case things went wrong. Diego kept the horses ready at all times. Ruth gathered supplies, food, water, medical supplies, and stored them in the root cellar. And still, they waited. Shaw made no more moves, no more shots, no more threats. The silence was almost worse than the violence. He's waiting for us to let our guard down, Caleb said one night, lying beside Ruth in the darkness. Or he's planning something bigger. That too. Caleb pulled her closer. Are you sorry you stayed? Ruth turned to face him. What? You could have been safe in Ohio by now, with your brother. With people who don't want to burn your house down. I could have. Ruth traced the line of his jaw. But then I wouldn't have you. Ruth, Caleb, listen to me. I spent years running from things. From Patterson, from shame, from anyone who might hurt me. And you know what I learned? Running doesn't make you safe. It just makes you alone. She kissed him softly. I'd rather face danger with you than live safely without you. His arms tightened around her. God, I love you. I love you too. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's another day of waiting. But tomorrow brought something none of them expected. Ruth was in the kitchen when she heard the wagon. She looked out the window and froze. It was Shaw, in their yard, alone. Caleb! She grabbed the rifle from beside the door. Caleb appeared from the barn, Elijah at his side, both armed, both tense. That's close enough, Shaw. Caleb's voice carried across the yard. Shaw held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. I come in peace, Thornton. I want to talk. We got nothing to talk about. I think we do. Shaw climbed down from his wagon slowly. I'm here to make you an offer. The answer's no. You haven't heard it yet. Don't need to. Whatever you're selling, I ain't buying. Shaw smiled that cold smile. Even if what I'm selling is the truth about your wife? Ruth felt ice spread through her veins. Get off my land, Caleb growled. Did she tell you everything about St. Louis? Did she tell you about the child? The world stopped. Ruth couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there as Shaw's words landed like bullets. There wasn't just an accusation. Shaw's voice was almost pleasant. There was a baby, Patterson's baby. That's why she really left. That's what she's been hiding from you. Caleb turned to look at Ruth, and Ruth, who had promised herself she would never lie to him, felt her whole world crumble. Is it true? Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. Ruth opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Not the way he's telling it. Her voice shook. Caleb, please, let me explain. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. Shaw watched them both, satisfaction spreading across his face like poison. I'll leave you two to discuss it, he said, climbing back onto his wagon. My offer stands, Thornton. Sell me the ranch. Take your wife and whatever secret she's still keeping and start over somewhere else. It's the smart move. He drove away, leaving devastation in his wake. Ruth stood frozen on the porch. Caleb stood frozen in the yard. Between them, Shaw's words echoed like thunder. Caleb, Ruth's voice cracked, please, It's not what you think." He didn't answer, didn't move, just stood there with his back to her, shoulders rigid. "There was a baby," she forced the words out. "But it wasn't Patterson's. It wasn't... Caleb, I was never with Patterson. Never."
What he tried to do, I fought him off. But there was someone else, before, a man I thought loved me. Still nothing. I was 18. He promised to marry me. Then he disappeared, and I found out I was pregnant, and Ruth choked on a sob. "I lost the baby. Fever. I was sick for weeks. When I recovered, Patterson started his harassment, and I couldn't tell anyone about any of it. The shame was too much." Caleb finally turned. His face was unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid." Tears streamed down Ruth's face. "Afraid you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now." "How am I looking at you?" "Like I'm a stranger. Like everything between us was a lie." Caleb closed his eyes. When he opened them, Ruth saw something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not betrayal. Pain. Deep, wounded pain. "I'm not upset about the baby," he said quietly. "I'm not upset about some man from your past. I'm upset because you didn't trust me enough to tell me." "I was going to." "When? After our first anniversary? Our fifth?" His voice broke. "Ruth, I stood in front of the whole town and declared my faith in you. I married you. I promised you everything I have and everything I am. And you couldn't give me the truth?" "I was afraid of losing you." "And now?" Ruth felt the ground crumbling beneath her feet. "Am I?" Caleb was silent for a long, terrible moment. Then he walked past her into the house and closed the door. Ruth stood alone on the porch, watching the sun set on everything she'd built. And somewhere in the distance, Victor Shaw was smiling. Ruth didn't sleep that night. She sat in the kitchen, wrapped in a shawl, listening to the silence of a house that had become her home. Upstairs, Caleb's footsteps had gone quiet hours ago. Whether he was sleeping or lying awake like her, she couldn't know. Molly found her there at dawn. "Child?" Molly's voice was soft.
"You look like death."
"Feel like it, too." Molly sat down across from her.
"Elijah told me what happened, what Shaw said."
"It's true, most of it." Ruth's voice was hollow.
"I should have told Caleb. I should have trusted him."
"Yes, you should have." Molly's tone was gentle but firm. "But you didn't. And now you got to figure out what comes next."
"What if there is no next? What if he can't forgive me?"
"Then you'll survive. You've survived worse." Molly took her hand.
"But I've known Caleb Thornton most of his life. He's hurt right now. Hurt makes people do foolish things. But underneath all that hurt is a man who loves you something fierce. Love ain't always enough." "No, but it's a start."
Molly squeezed her hand.
"Give him time. And when he's ready to talk, tell him everything. No more secrets."
"What if—" The kitchen door opened. Caleb stood there, looking as wrecked as Ruth felt. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw shadowed with stubble. Molly rose quietly.
"I'll leave you two alone."
She slipped out, closing the door behind her. Silence stretched between them like a chasm. "I didn't sleep," Caleb finally said.
"Neither did I."
He moved to the stove, poured himself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. Ruth watched him, afraid to speak, afraid to breathe. "Tell me everything." His voice was rough. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out." Ruth closed her eyes, drew a breath, and began.
"His name was Daniel Foster. I met him when I was 17. He worked at the mill near our farm in Ohio. He was handsome and charming, and he said all the right things."
Her voice caught.
"I was young and stupid, And I believed him. Caleb said nothing, just listened. He courted me for 6 months, said he loved me, said he wanted to marry me. And I— Ruth's cheeks burned with old shame. I let him. I thought we were going to spend our lives together. What happened? He disappeared. One day he was there, the next he was gone.
Took a job in Pennsylvania, someone said. Left no word, no address, nothing. Ruth's hands twisted in her lap. A month later, I realized I was carrying his child. Caleb's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. I was terrified. My father had died. My mother was gone. I was raising my siblings alone. I didn't know what to do. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Then the fever came. I was sick for 3 weeks. When it broke, the baby was gone. Ruth. I never told anyone, not even Thomas. I buried that grief so deep, I thought I'd never have to face it again. She looked up at him, eyes raw. Then I went to St. Louis, got a job with the Pattersons. And Mr. Patterson started looking at me, touching me, saying things. Caleb's jaw tightened. I refused him, every time, but he wouldn't stop. And when I threatened to tell his wife, he said he'd destroy me. Said he'd tell everyone I was a whore. Said he had connections who'd swear I'd seduced him. Ruth's voice hardened. So I ran, again, because running was all I knew how to do. Until you came here. Until I came here. Ruth met his eyes. I should have told you. I know that now. But Caleb, I was so afraid. Every man I ever trusted either left me or tried to hurt me. I didn't know how to believe that you were different. Am I? His voice was quiet. Different? You're the best man I've ever known. Ruth's voice broke. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't trust you with all of me. Caleb set down his cup, crossed the kitchen, knelt in front of her chair. I ain't angry about your past, he said. I'm angry because you thought you had to carry it alone. I'm angry because Shaw got to use it as a weapon. I'm angry because I wanted to be someone you could tell anything to, and you didn't. I know. But I'm not leaving. He took her hands. I married you for better or worse. This is the worst part. We'll get through it. You still want me? After everything? Ruth, Caleb's voice was fierce. I will always want you. Do you understand? There is nothing in your past, nothing Shaw can dig up, nothing you could tell me that would make me stop loving you. She broke then, completely. Sobbing into his shoulder while he held her, stroked her hair, murmured words of comfort against her temple. No more secrets, she whispered when she could speak again. No more secrets, he agreed, from either of us. What secrets do you have? Caleb pulled back, looking into her eyes. Sarah, my first wife. She didn't just die of fever. Ruth went still. She took laudanum, too much of it. His voice cracked. The doctor said it could have been an accident, but I knew. She was unhappy, isolated. I was always working, always focused on the ranch. I didn't see how much she was suffering until it was too late. Caleb. I blamed myself for years, still do some days. He cupped her face. That's why I've been so afraid of letting you in. I was terrified I'd fail you the same way I failed her. You haven't failed me. I almost did. Last night, when I walked away, you needed time. That's not failing. It felt like it. He pressed his forehead to hers. I never want to make you feel alone, Ruth. Never. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, she echoed. They held each other in the kitchen as the sun rose higher, two broken people choosing to be whole together. It was Elijah who interrupted them.
Boss, his voice was urgent. Riders coming, 6 of them. Caleb was on his feet instantly. Shaw? Can't tell yet, but they ain't friendly. Get Ruth to the cellar. No, Ruth stood, wiping her eyes. I'm not hiding. Ruth, I said no. Her voice was steady now. Whatever this is, we face it together. You just said so. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded. Stay behind me. If shooting starts, you run. No arguments.
They walked out onto the porch together. 6 riders approached in a cloud of dust. At their head was a man Ruth didn't recognize. Tall, weathered, wearing a badge on his chest. Caleb Thornton? The man called. That's me. I'm Sheriff Warren from Cheyenne. Got a warrant for your arrest. Ruth's blood ran cold. On what charges? Caleb's voice was steady. Cattle rustling. Victor Shaw filed a complaint. Says you stole 200 head from his ranch last month. That's a lie. Maybe so, but I got papers that say otherwise. Sheriff Warren dismounted. You can come peacefully, or you can make this difficult. Your choice. Ruth grabbed Caleb's arm. This is wrong. Shaw's the one who's been stealing from us. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I got a job to do. Your job is to arrest innocent men on false charges? Ruth. Caleb's voice was calm. Too calm. It's all right. It's not all right. They're going to... I know. He turned to face her. But fighting right now will only make things worse. I'll go with them. You stay here. Contact Harrison in Cheyenne. He'll know what to do. Caleb, I can't let them... You can. You will. He kissed her forehead. I'll be all right. I promise. Sheriff Warren stepped forward with handcuffs. Ruth watched as her husband was led away in chains. Watched as the riders disappeared down the road toward Cheyenne. Watched until there was nothing left to see but dust. Then she turned to Elijah. Saddle my horse. Ruth, saddle my horse. I'm going after them. Caleb said to stay here. Caleb's not here. Ruth's voice was steel. And I'm done letting other people decide my fate. Elijah studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll get the horse. Ruth rode into Ridgewood like her life depended on it, which it did. She stopped first at the telegraph office, sending urgent messages to Thomas, to Harrison the lawyer, to anyone who might help. Then she went to the general store. Mrs. Thornton? Mr. Henderson looked surprised. Is everything... No, everything is not. Ruth slapped her hand on the counter. Victor Shaw just had my husband arrested on false charges. I need to know who in this town will stand with us. Henderson's face went pale. Arrested? On what? Cattle rustling, which is a lie, as everyone knows. Shaw's been trying to steal our ranch for months. This is just his latest move. Ma'am, I sympathize, but going against Shaw, I'm not asking you to go against anyone. I'm asking you to tell the truth. Ruth leaned closer. Shaw threatened to burn our ranch. He sent shooters to fire at us. He's been spreading lies about me all over town. Now he's fabricated charges to get my husband locked up. How long before he does the same to one of you? Henderson's jaw tightened. My husband stood in the street and declared his faith in me when everyone else was ready to believe Shaw's lies. Now I'm asking this community to return the favor. Silence. Then Henderson nodded slowly. What do you need? Witnesses. Anyone who's seen Shaw's men on our property. Anyone who knows about the fence cutting, the scattered cattle, the threats. Anyone willing to swear to it in a court of law. That's a lot to ask. I know, but it's the only way to beat a man like Shaw. Ruth straightened. I'm going to Cheyenne to fight for my husband.
When I come back, I need to know this town will fight with me." She turned and walked out before Henderson could respond. The ride to Cheyenne took 4 hours. Ruth pushed her horse hard, driven by a fear she couldn't name. Shaw had resources. Shaw had connections. If he managed to get Caleb convicted on false charges, she wouldn't let herself finish that thought. Harrison's office was in a small building near the courthouse. Ruth burst through the door without knocking. "Mr. Harrison, my husband's been arrested."
The lawyer rose, startled. "Mrs. Thornton, I received your telegram. I'm already working on—" "Work faster. Shaw's going to railroad him if we don't stop it. I understand your concern, but these things take time. We don't have time." Ruth's voice cracked. "Please, Caleb is innocent. Everyone knows Shaw fabricated these charges. There has to be something we can do." Harrison studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "There might be one thing, but it's risky." "Tell me." "Shaw's not as untouchable as he thinks. I've been hearing rumors for months about his business dealings, about people he's cheated, threatened, ruined." Harrison pulled out a folder. "If we can get enough of them to testify—" "They're scared. Shaw has power." "Power only works if people believe in it." Harrison handed her the folder. "These are names. People who might be willing to talk if they knew they weren't alone." Ruth looked at the list. 12 names. 12 potential allies. "I need to see my husband first." "The jail's 2 blocks east. Tell them I sent you." Ruth took the folder. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long fight ahead." The jail smelled like sweat and despair. Ruth was led to a small cell where Caleb sat on a narrow cot, his head in his hands. When he looked up and saw her, something broke in his expression. "Ruth, what are you doing here? Did you really think I'd stay home while they locked you up?" She gripped the bars between them. "I've already talked to Harrison. He has a plan." "Ruth, this is dangerous. Shaw can go to hell." Her voice was fierce. "I'm not losing you, Caleb. Not to him, not to anyone." "You shouldn't have come." "You would have done the same for me." He couldn't argue with that. "Harrison gave me names," Ruth continued. "People Shaw has hurt. If we can get them to testify—" "They won't. Everyone's too scared of him." "Then I'll make them unscared." Ruth's jaw set. "I spent 6 years running from powerful men. I'm done running. It's time to fight." Caleb reached through the bars, touching her face. "You're the strongest person I know." "I learned from you." She pressed her hand over his. "Hold on, Caleb. I'm going to get you out of here." "How?" Ruth smiled grimly. "By doing what I do best. Organizing." The next 3 days were a blur. Ruth visited every name on Harrison's list. Some slammed doors in her face. Some listened but refused to help. But a few, a precious, crucial few, agreed to testify. Mrs. Margaret Cole, whose husband had been driven to suicide after Shaw destroyed his business. Mr. James Whitfield, a former ranch hand who'd witnessed Shaw's men altering brands on stolen cattle. Miss Eleanor Parks, a school teacher who'd overheard Shaw bragging about his plan to break Caleb Thornton. One by one, Ruth built her case. One by one, she chipped away at Shaw's armor of fear. On the 3rd night, she received an unexpected visitor at her hotel. A knock at the door. Ruth opened it to find Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who had sneered at her in Ridgewood, standing in the hallway. "May I come in?" Ruth's jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because I have information you need." Mrs. Patterson's voice was subdued. "About Victor Shaw." Against her better judgment, Ruth stepped aside. Mrs. Patterson entered, looking older and smaller than she had at the church social.
I owe you an apology, Mrs. Thornton. I believed Shaw's lies about you. I was wrong. Why the change of heart? Because I found out what he did to my niece. Mrs. Patterson's voice shook. She worked at his ranch 2 years ago. He forced himself on her. When she tried to tell someone, he had her committed to an asylum. Said she was hysterical, delusional. Ruth felt sick. Where is she now? Still there. I only found out last week.
I've been trying to get her released, but Shaw has friends everywhere. He won't have friends much longer. Ruth's voice was hard. Will you testify about what he did? If it will help bring him down, I'll do whatever you need. Ruth looked at this woman who had been her enemy just days ago. Why tell me, after everything you said? Because you were right, Mrs. Patterson met her eyes. I don't know you. I judged you on gossip and lies. And while I was busy looking down my nose at you, a monster was destroying innocent lives. Her voice cracked. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. Ruth extended her hand. Then let's make it right together. The hearing was held on a Saturday. The courtroom was packed. Ranchers from 3 counties, townspeople from Ridgewood, journalists from as far as Denver. Everyone wanted to see the showdown between Victor Shaw and the woman who dared challenge him. Ruth sat behind Harrison, her hands folded, her face calm. Inside, she was terrified. Caleb was brought in wearing chains. Their eyes met across the courtroom. He nodded once. I trust you. She nodded back. I won't let you down. Shaw arrived with a team of lawyers and an expression of supreme confidence. He took a seat without looking at Ruth. Judge Morrison called the court to order. We are here to determine whether sufficient evidence exists to hold Caleb Thornton on charges of cattle rustling. Mr. Prosecutor, you may begin. Shaw's lawyer stood, presenting his case with polished ease. Documents, witness statements, a carefully constructed web of lies. Ruth listened, her stomach churning. It sounded convincing. It sounded real. Then Harrison stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Mrs. Margaret Cole. The widow took the stand, her voice steady, as she described how Shaw had destroyed her husband's shipping business through fraud and intimidation. How he'd laughed when her husband begged for mercy. How she'd found him hanging in the barn 3 months later. Objection! Shaw's lawyer stood. This has nothing to do with the charges against Mr. Thornton. On the contrary, Harrison replied. It establishes a pattern of criminal behavior by the plaintiff. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Continue. One by one, the witnesses came. James Whitfield, describing the brand alterations he'd seen. Eleanor Parks, recounting Shaw's boasts about breaking Thornton. Mrs. Patterson, her voice shaking, telling the court about her niece in the asylum. And finally, Ruth herself. Mrs. Thornton, Harrison's voice was gentle. Can you describe the harassment you and your husband have endured? Ruth told them everything. The cut fences, the scattered cattle, the shooters on the ridge, the threatening note, Shaw's visit to their ranch, his cruel revelation of her past, his smug certainty that no one would believe her over him. And why didn't you report these incidents to the authorities? Because Shaw owns the authorities. Ruth's voice rang through the courtroom. He spent years building a network of fear. People are terrified to speak against him. But fear can't last forever. Eventually, the truth comes out. She looked directly at Shaw. It's out now. The courtroom erupted. Shaw's face went red, then white. His lawyers huddled together, whispering urgently. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! The noise subsided. Based on the testimony presented, the judge continued, I find insufficient evidence to support the charges against Caleb Thornton. The defendant is released immediately.
Ruth's heart soared. "Furthermore," Judge Morrison said, his voice sharp, "I am ordering an investigation into the activities of Victor Shaw. The allegations presented today are serious enough to warrant a full inquiry." Shaw shot to his feet. "This is outrageous."
You can't.
"I can, and I will." The judge's gaze was cold. "Mr. Shaw, I strongly suggest you cooperate with the investigation. Any attempt to intimidate witnesses or obstruct justice will result in immediate arrest." The gavel came down. "Court is adjourned." Ruth was on her feet before the echo faded, pushing through the crowd to reach Caleb. The guards removed his chains, and then he was there, his arms around her, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "You did it," he whispered against her hair. "You actually did it. We did it." She pulled back to look at him. "Together." "Together," he agreed. They walked out of the courthouse hand in hand into the bright Wyoming sun. Shaw stood on the steps, watching them with murder in his eyes. "This isn't over, Thornton." Caleb stopped, turned. "No, it's not. But it will be. And when it is, you'll be the one in chains." "You think you've won? You think these people will protect you?" Shaw's voice was a snarl.
I'll destroy you. Both of you. I'll burn everything you love to the ground. Try it.
Ruth stepped forward, her voice steady. "I've survived worse than you, Mr. Shaw, and I'll be standing long after you're gone." Shaw's face contorted with rage. For a moment, Ruth thought he might strike her. Then he turned and stalked away, his lawyers hurrying after him. Caleb put his arm around Ruth's shoulders. "Let's go home." "Home." The word tasted sweet. "Yes, let's go home." The ride back to Thornton Creek Ranch was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of fear or uncertainty, the silence of peace. As they crested the final ridge and the ranch came into view, Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. The house, the barn, the people waiting on the porch, Molly, Elijah, Diego, all the hands who'd become family. "Welcome back, boss," Diego called. "Welcome back, Senora Ruth." Molly ran down the steps, pulling Ruth into a fierce hug. "You did it! You really did it!"
I had help. You had courage. Molly pulled back, eyes shining.
"That's all that matters." That night, they gathered around the big table in the ranch house. Every chair was filled. Every plate was piled high. Laughter and conversation flowed like water. Ruth looked around at the people she loved, at the home she'd built from nothing, at the man who'd given her a chance when she'd lost everything. Caleb caught her eye across the table, smiled. "What are you thinking?" he asked later, when the others had gone and they stood together on the porch. "I'm thinking this is more than I ever dreamed of." Ruth leaned into him. "A month ago I was running, scared, alone. Now I have a husband, a family, a home worth fighting for." "Worth dying for?" "Worth living for." She looked up at him. "That's better." Caleb kissed her softly. "We still got a fight ahead. Shaw's not finished." "I know, but we'll face it. Together." "Together," Ruth smiled. "I'm getting used to that word." "Good, because you're going to be hearing it for the rest of your life." They stood together, watching the stars come out over their land. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new struggles. But tonight, they had everything they needed. Each other. 3 weeks after the hearing, Victor Shaw made his final move. Ruth woke to the smell of smoke. "Caleb!" She shook him awake. "Fire!" He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened. Through the window, orange light flickered against the darkness. "The barn!" Caleb grabbed his boots. "Stay here." "Like hell I will." They ran outside together. The barn was engulfed, flames shooting toward the sky. Horses screamed, Men shouted. Chaos everywhere. "Get the horses out!" Elijah was already at the barn doors, fighting the heat. "Diego, the water pump! Move!" Ruth grabbed a bucket and joined the line. Her arms burned, her lungs burned, but she kept moving, kept passing, kept fighting. "Ruth!"
Caleb's voice cut through the roar.
"The house!" She turned. Flames were licking at the back porch. The fire had spread faster than anyone realized. "No!" The word came out as a whisper, then louder. "No!" She ran toward the house, but Caleb caught her arm. "It's too late. We have to get everyone clear." "Our home, Caleb, everything we built, can be rebuilt." His grip tightened. "You can't. Come on." They retreated to the yard as the flames consumed everything. The barn collapsed first, sending sparks spiraling into the night. Then the bunkhouse. Then, slowly, terribly, the main house. Ruth stood in Caleb's arms, watching their life burn. "Shaw." Her voice was hollow. "This was Shaw." "I know." "He said he'd burn everything." Tears streamed down her face. "He meant it." "He'll pay for this." Caleb's voice was steel. "I swear to God, he'll pay." By dawn, nothing was left but ashes and smoke.
The ranch hands gathered in a circle, faces black with soot, eyes hollow with shock. Molly wept against Elijah's shoulder. Diego stood with his fists clenched, staring at the ruins. "What do we do now, boss?" Billy's voice cracked. "Where do we go?" Caleb looked at the boy, then at his men, then at his wife. "Nowhere." His voice carried across the devastation. "We don't go anywhere." "But the ranch is more than buildings. It's land, it's people, it's everything we've built together." Caleb straightened. "Shaw thinks he's broken us. He's wrong. We're going to rebuild. Every fence, every barn, every board of this house. And when we're done, it'll be stronger than before." "With what money?" Elijah's voice was gentle. "Boss, we lost everything." "Not everything." Ruth stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "We still have each other. We still have the land. And we still have the truth." "The truth won't buy lumber." "No, but it might buy something better."
Ruth looked at Caleb.
"The investigation into Shaw. If we can prove he did this—"
"We can't prove anything," Elijah shook his head. "His men will have alibis. There won't be witnesses."
"There's always witnesses." Ruth's jaw set. "Someone saw something. Someone knows something. We just have to find them."
"And in the meantime, we got nothing. No shelter, no supplies, no—"
"You got us."
Everyone turned. A wagon was approaching from the road. Then another. Then another. A line of them, stretching back toward Ridgewood. Mr. Henderson was driving the first one. He climbed down, looking at the destruction with grim sympathy. "Heard about the fire, whole town did." He gestured to the wagons behind him. "We brought what we could. Food, blankets, tools. Mrs. Thompson's got lumber coming from the mill." Ruth's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you were right," Henderson met her eyes. "Shaw's been terrorizing this territory for too long. When you stood up to him, you showed us it was possible. We ain't about to let him win now." More wagons arrived, more people. Ranchers who'd been afraid to speak. Townspeople who'd looked the other way. Even Mrs. Patterson, her face set with determination. "I brought medical supplies," she said to Ruth, "and my niece's testimony. She's willing to swear to what Shaw did to her. All of it." Ruth took the older woman's hands. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself." Mrs. Patterson's voice shook. "You showed me what courage looks like. It's the least I can do." By noon, a small city of tents had sprung up around the ruins. People worked side by side, ranchers and townspeople, former enemies now united. The sound of hammering filled the air. Caleb found Ruth standing apart, watching it all with wonder. "You did this," he said quietly. "We did this." "No." He turned her to face him. "I was ready to give up. After Sarah died, after Shaw started his campaign, after everything.
I was ready to walk away. You're the one who made me fight. You're the one who showed this whole community what was worth fighting for. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly what makes you extraordinary." Caleb kissed her forehead. "I love you, Ruth Thornton." "I love you too." She leaned into him. "Now let's go help rebuild our home." The news about Shaw came 3 days later. Sheriff Warren rode into what was left of the ranch, his face grim. "Thornton, Mrs. Thornton, we need to talk." Ruth's stomach clenched. "What happened?" "Victor Shaw is dead." The world stopped. "Dead?" Caleb's voice was flat. "How?" "Shot. In his own home. Last night." Warren dismounted. "His foreman found him this morning." "Who did it?" "That's what I'm here to find out." Warren's eyes were sharp. "Where were you last night, Thornton?" "Here, rebuilding, with about 50 witnesses." "Mrs. Thornton?" "Same." Warren nodded slowly. "I figured, but I had to ask." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "We found this in Shaw's office. Thought you should see it." Ruth took the paper. It was a letter, written in Shaw's own hand. "To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I've made too many enemies to survive much longer. But before I go, I want the truth known. I set the fire at Thornton Creek Ranch. I ordered the shooters. I fabricated the cattle rustling charges. I destroyed anyone who stood in my way, including the women I took advantage of. I'm not apologizing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just stating facts, because the truth should survive even when I don't. Victor Shaw." Ruth's hands trembled as she finished reading. "He confessed," she whispered. "Everything." "More than that." Warren's voice was heavy. "We found records in his safe. Every bribe, every threat, every crime. Enough to put half a dozen of his associates behind bars." "And the fire? The damage to our ranch?" "His estate will be seized. There'll be restitution." Warren paused. "It won't bring back what you lost. But it's something." Caleb took the letter from Ruth's shaking hands, read it twice. "Who killed him?" "We don't know yet. Might never know. Man like Shaw had enemies everywhere." Warren mounted his horse. "I'd say justice was served, one way or another." He rode away, leaving Ruth and Caleb alone with Shaw's confession. "It's over," Ruth said, her voice strange and distant. "It's really over." "Yeah." Caleb pulled her close. "It's over." But Ruth couldn't quite believe it. After months of fear, months of fighting, the monster was simply gone, killed by his own darkness. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted. "You don't have to know right now." Caleb stroked her hair. "You just have to keep breathing. The rest will come." 2 weeks later, the investigation results came in. Shaw's killer was one of his own men, a ranch hand named Cooper, who'd been forced to participate in the fire at Thornton Creek. Turns out, Cooper's sister had been engaged to a man Shaw had ruined years before. The man had killed himself. Cooper had waited years for revenge. "Justice," Elijah said when he heard, "comes around eventually." "Doesn't feel like justice." Ruth stared at the telegram. "Feels like more violence." "Sometimes that's all there is." Molly put her arm around Ruth. "The important thing is, you're safe now. You can finally stop looking over your shoulder."
Safe. The word felt foreign in Ruth's mouth. She'd spent so long being afraid that safety seemed like something that happened to other people. But as the days passed, she began to believe it. The rebuilding continued. Shaw's estate paid for materials, for labor, for everything they'd lost. The new house was bigger than the old one, with room for the family Ruth and Caleb were building. Because there was going to be a family.
Ruth discovered it 6 weeks after the fire. The nausea, the exhaustion, the strange tenderness. She didn't tell Caleb right away. She was afraid. After losing her first baby, after believing for so long that she couldn't carry a child, she couldn't quite trust her own body. But Molly noticed. "You're pregnant," the older woman said flatly, watching Ruth push away her breakfast for the 3rd day in a row. Ruth's head snapped up. "How did you—" "Child, I've delivered more babies than I can count. I know the signs." Molly's face softened. "How far along?" "I don't know. Maybe 2 months?" Ruth's voice shook. "I'm scared, Molly. Last time was different. You were alone, sick, barely surviving." Molly took her hands. "This time you have a husband who loves you, a home, people who'll take care of you. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll face it together. But Ruth," Molly's eyes were bright with tears, "don't let fear steal this joy from you. You deserve to be happy about this." Ruth felt the first tears slip down her cheeks. "I am happy. I'm terrified and happy, and I don't know which one is stronger." "That's motherhood, child," Molly laughed wetly. "Get used to it." Ruth told Caleb that evening. They were sitting on the porch of their half-built house, watching the sun set over their land. The air smelled like sawdust and hope. "I need to tell you something," Ruth said. Caleb turned to her, concern flickering in his eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took his hand, pressed it against her belly. "Everything's right." She watched his face change. Confusion, realization, joy, fear, joy again, overwhelming everything else. "Ruth," his voice cracked, "are you saying—" "I'm pregnant." The words came out on a sob of happiness. "We're going to have a baby." Caleb pulled her into his arms so tight she could barely breathe. She felt his whole body shaking. "I thought—" He couldn't finish. "I thought I'd never—" "I know," Ruth clung to him. "I thought the same thing. But here we are. Here we are." He pulled back, cupping her face, looking at her like she'd hung the moon. "I love you. I love you so much." "I love you too." She kissed him softly. "We're going to be parents." "We're going to be parents," he laughed, the sound full of wonder. "My God, Ruth, after everything we've been through." "This is our reward," she smiled through her tears. "This is what we were fighting for." The months passed quickly after that. The house was finished by September. A beautiful 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and windows that caught every ray of light. Ruth decorated it with curtains from the general store and quilts Molly helped her sew. The investigation into Shaw's crimes concluded in October. 6 of his associates went to prison. His ranch was broken up and sold to homesteaders who'd been pushed off their land. The territory breathed easier. In November, Thomas came to visit. He barely recognized the place. "You built all this?" He stood in the yard, turning in slow circles. "In a few months?" "We had help," Ruth smiled, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Turns out people will do amazing things when you ask." "I'm proud of you, Ruthie." Thomas's eyes were bright. "Mama and Papa would be proud too." "I hope so." Ruth looked at the house, the barn, the corrals filled with healthy cattle. "I hope they can see this, wherever they are." "They can," Thomas put his arm around her. "I'm sure of it."
The baby came in February, during the worst blizzard of the year. Ruth labored for 16 hours while the wind howled and snow piled against the windows. Molly stayed by her side, steady and calm. Caleb paced the kitchen, wearing a groove in the new floorboards. "You need to sit down," Elijah told him. "You're making me dizzy." "I can't sit. I can't." Caleb's voice broke.
What if something goes wrong? What if... Then Molly will handle it. That woman's delivered babies in worse conditions than this. Elijah pushed him into a chair. Trust her. Trust Ruth. They're both stronger than you're giving them credit for. Caleb sat. Stood. Sat again. Then he heard it. A baby's cry. Thin and reedy at first, then growing stronger. The most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "Caleb!" Molly's voice rang from upstairs. "Get up here!" He took the stairs 3 at a time. Ruth was propped against the pillows, exhausted and radiant, holding a small bundle against her chest. "Come meet your daughter," she said. Caleb crossed the room on legs that felt like water. He looked down at the tiny face, the wisp of dark hair, the perfect little fingers. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's perfect." "She is." Ruth's eyes were wet. "I want to name her Sarah, after your first wife, if that's all right." Caleb's throat closed completely. He couldn't speak, could only nod. "Sarah Ruth Thornton," Ruth murmured, looking down at their daughter. "Welcome to the family." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around his wife, looking at the miracle they'd created together. Outside, the blizzard raged. Inside, there was only warmth and love, and a future brighter than either of them had ever imagined. "Thank you," he finally managed. "For what?" "For everything. For coming here. For staying. For fighting." He kissed her temple. "For giving me a reason to believe in tomorrow." "You gave me the same thing." Ruth leaned into him. "We saved each other, Caleb." "Yeah," he smiled, watching their daughter sleep. "I guess we did." 5 years later, Ruth stood on the porch of Thornton Creek Ranch, watching her family. Sarah, now a bright-eyed 5-year-old, chased chickens around the yard while her 3-year-old brother James toddled after her. Caleb worked nearby, repairing a fence, keeping one eye on the children. The ranch had grown. More cattle, more hands, more buildings. What had been rebuilt from ashes was now the largest spread in 3 counties. But more than the buildings, more than the land, Ruth was proudest of what couldn't be measured. The community they'd built, the lives they'd touched, the people who'd found hope on Thornton Creek. Diego had married last spring. He and his wife lived in the foreman's cabin now that Elijah and Molly had retired to a small house they'd built at the edge of the property. Thomas visited twice a year, bringing news from Ohio and gifts for his niece and nephew. Mrs. Patterson had become an unexpected friend, helping Ruth start a school for ranch children and working tirelessly to reform the territory's treatment of women. And Shaw's niece, the one who'd been locked in the asylum. She lived on the ranch now, helping Molly in the kitchen, slowly healing from her ordeal. "Mama! Mama, look!" Sarah ran up, holding something in her cupped hands. "I found a butterfly!" Ruth knelt down to look. A monarch, its wings orange and black, resting trustingly in her daughter's palms. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, but we should let it go, don't you think? It has places to fly." "But I want to keep it." "I know, but some things aren't meant to be kept." Ruth stroked her daughter's hair. "Some things are meant to be free." Sarah considered this with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. Then she opened her hands and watched the butterfly spiral up into the blue sky. "Bye-bye, butterfly." "Bye-bye." Ruth kissed her daughter's forehead. "Now go wash up. Dinner's almost ready."
Sarah ran off, James stumbling after her on his short legs. Ruth stayed where she was, watching them go. Caleb appeared beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about how far we've come." Ruth leaned into him. 6 years ago, I was running for my life. I had nothing. No home, no family, no hope. And now? Now I have everything. She looked up at him. Everything I ever wanted, and more than I ever dreamed. Me too. Caleb kissed her softly. You know what I thought, the day you stepped off that stagecoach? What? I thought you were the most stubborn-looking woman I'd ever seen. He grinned at her mock outrage. And I thought, that one's going to be trouble. Was I wrong? Ruth laughed. No, you weren't wrong at all. Best trouble I ever got into. Caleb Thornton. Ruth Thornton. They stood together, watching their children play, watching the sun begin its slow descent toward the mountains. Behind them stood the house they'd built from nothing. Around them stretched the land they'd fought to keep. Before them lay a future they'd earned through tears and courage and love. Mama! Papa! Dinner! Sarah's voice rang across the yard. Coming! Ruth called back, but she didn't move. Not yet. One more minute, she said to Caleb.
I just want one more minute of this. We've got a lifetime of minutes. I know, but this one is special. Ruth smiled, her heart full. This is the minute I realized I'm finally home. Caleb pulled her closer. Welcome home, Ruth. Welcome home, Caleb. They walked toward the house together, toward their children's laughter and the smell of Molly's cooking, and the warmth of a family gathered around a table. 6 years ago, a desperate woman had answered an advertisement from a lonely rancher. She'd come west looking for escape and found something far more precious. A man who loved her, children who needed her, a community that stood with her, and a home that no fire, no enemy, no force on earth could ever take away. Because home wasn't a building. Home was the people who held your heart. Ruth Brennan had spent her whole life running. Ruth Thornton had finally found a place worth staying, and she would never run again.